She begged the officer not to do it. Her voice cracked, her hands trembling as she reached for her purse. Her 8-year-old daughter watched, frozen, while shoppers walked past like nothing was happening. Then the officer grabbed the little girl too. Screamed she was interfering. And when the mother finally spoke her name out loud, not yelling, just saying it, the officer's face drained of color. Because she wasn't just a customer. She was someone who could end his career. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching us from. Don't touch her. The woman said sharply, stepping between her daughter and the officer's outstretched hand. It was supposed to be a 5-minute stop. Sandra Lowe, 33, stood in aisle 4 of a grocery store in Cedarville, Ohio, milk in one hand, her daughter Kyla in the other. They had ballet practice in an hour. Sandra wore sweatpants, hair tied up, no makeup. Just another tired mom trying to get home. But to Officer Tim Rindle, she didn't look like she belonged. He had been standing near the front registers when he first noticed her. Tall, dark-skinned, alone. No cart. Just wandering, he thought. Looking around too much. Acting like someone planning to steal. He followed her into the dairy aisle, ignoring the actual man stuffing packs of steaks into his jacket 2 rows over. "Ma'am, store security got a call about suspicious activity," he said. Sandra turned slowly. Confused. "From who?" "I've been here 5 minutes. I'll need to see your ID," he cut her off. "For milk?" She raised her eyebrows. "Don't get smart. You fit a description." "Of what?" Officer Rindle stepped closer, hand resting on the taser at his hip. His voice lowered. "A woman matching your look tried to pass counterfeit bills at this same store yesterday." Sandra blinked. "This again. The same excuse they used at the bank last year. Matches the description. Vague. Always enough to justify humiliation. Never enough to be challenged. I'm with my daughter." "We're leaving," she said calmly, but her fingers curled tighter around the milk jug. "Not without ID. Am I being detained?" "If you don't comply." "Yes." Kyla clutched her mother's hoodie. Her voice was a whisper. "Mommy, are we in trouble?" Sandra's heart cracked, but her face stayed calm. "No, baby. We're just talking to the officer." The shoppers nearby looked, then turned away. One man pulled out his phone, not to record, but to check sports scores. Sandra took a slow breath and reached into her bag. Deliberate, non-threatening, every move exaggerated, like she'd practiced it. Because she had. The officer snatched her wallet, flipping through it without permission. Then something shifted. His brows furrowed. "Sandra Lowe?" "Yes. You're the one who—" He stopped. It was there in his eyes. Recognition. Uncertainty. Like he had heard the name before but couldn't place it. But she saw it. The moment he realized he might have made a mistake. Then he doubled down. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Kyla screamed. "She didn't do anything." "Don't hurt her." "That's interfering," the officer barked. And before Sandra could speak, he reached toward Kyla. That's when Sandra said it. Just one word. Her middle name. And the officer froze. Officer Rindle's hand hovered inches from the child's shoulder, frozen mid-reach. That one word, Sandra's middle name, had landed like a stone in the room. He blinked, then pulled back. "Where did you hear that name?" he asked, trying to sound firm, but his voice had thinned. "It's mine," Sandra said evenly. "You just saw it on my ID." But Rindle didn't answer. He was thinking. Fast. Running possibilities in his mind. Kyla still stood between them, silent now, clutching her mother's thigh like it was the only solid thing in the world. Sandra raised her voice just enough to be heard by the cashier watching nearby. "I'd like to know if I'm under arrest or free to go." "You're not going anywhere yet," Rindle snapped, louder than he meant to. A murmur rippled through the shoppers. One of them, an older white woman with a full cart, paused, unsure if she should move on or intervene. She chose to move on. Rindle stepped back and grabbed his radio. "I need backup to aisle 4. Possible match on yesterday's incident." His words were for protocol, not because he believed them. His eyes kept returning to the wallet, to the government ID tucked neatly behind Sandra's license. But he said nothing about it. Sandra's breath stayed slow. Her shoulders tense but upright. Every inch of her had gone still, like prey watching for the predator to make his next move. "Mommy, why is he calling more police?" Kyla whispered. "It's okay, baby. Just stay close," Sandra answered without looking down. Rindle heard the calm in her voice and hated it. That composed tone. That refusal to beg or cry. It made him feel like the power was slipping, and he needed to take it back. He motioned toward the milk jug still in Sandra's hand. "Put that down. Now." "Why?" "You could use it as a weapon." Sandra's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not anger. just the visible restraint of a woman who had heard too much already. She placed the milk slowly on the floor. Kyla mimicked her, setting her small pink backpack down. The silence stretched. Then, another voice. Officer Rendell? A second officer approached, younger, unsure. Badge reading M. Devine. You called for backup? Rendell turned toward him, nodded once. This woman may be connected to the counterfeit case. Took her ID. Name looks familiar. Devine glanced at Sandra, then at Kyla. His brows pulled slightly together. She's with her kid. Doesn't mean anything, Rendell muttered. Sandra watched it unfold. Quietly. She could have ended it now. Said what was on the ID. Explained her job. But she didn't. Not yet. Because she knew the moment she revealed it, the excuses would come. The false apologies. The rewrites of what just happened. And she wanted him to go further. To commit to it. You sure about this? Devine asked. Rendell's voice dropped again. She fits the type. Sandra looked up sharply. The type? Rendell didn't flinch. Loitering. No cart. Nervous. Won't say where she came from. Devine shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't how he'd been trained, but it was how the department operated. Rendell turned back to Sandra. Last chance. Say who you really are. She didn't blink. I already did. And then, just loud enough for Devine to hear, she added. You might want to look at the ID again. The backside. Rendell snatched it, flipped it, and his face changed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. And for the first time, he looked nervous. The ID was in his hands. Rendell stared at the back of it like he was trying to burn the letters off with his eyes. Department of Civil Rights, Federal Investigations Unit. Sandra Lowe, Federal Inspector. Authorized under Title VI. A seal. A number. A photo. All real. Rendell swallowed. Hard. Devine leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. She's federal? Rendell didn't answer. His grip tightened on the ID. His mind raced. He couldn't backpedal now. Too many people had seen. Too much said. Too much force already used. What exactly were you doing here? Rendell asked her, voice lower now. No longer commanding. Just trying to reframe. Buying milk, Sandra replied. And teaching my daughter how to survive being profiled. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't move. And that made it worse. The manager of the store appeared from behind the deli counter. His apron still on, nervous energy in his stride. Officer, is everything all right? We're getting complaints. Rendell turned sharply toward him. Mind your business, we're handling it. But the manager caught a glimpse of the badge in Sandra's open wallet. His face paled. Ma'am, I didn't realize. Sandra didn't look at him. You called them, didn't you? The manager hesitated. We got a report about suspicious behavior in aisle 4. It came from one of the cashiers. Let me guess. A woman who looked nervous, Sandra said. The man didn't reply. Kyla looked up at her mom, wide-eyed. What's happening, Mommy? They're deciding whether they want to admit they were wrong or double down, Sandra said quietly. Devine stepped back. He didn't want any part of this. Not now. We should let her go, he muttered to Rendell. This could get ugly. Rendell's pride screamed. Letting her go meant admitting what this was. And more importantly, who she was. Because now he remembered the name. Lowe. Sandra Lowe. She'd given a presentation 2 months ago at the department's bias training. Mandatory attendance. He had been there. Hadn't listened. But he remembered her face. And now she had him. Right here. In the aisle. Milk on the floor. Daughter in tears. He could feel the story writing itself. Sandra leaned slightly forward. You going to return my ID, officer? Rendell didn't move. The store had gone quieter. Shoppers still moved, but they were slower now. Watching. A few whispered. 2 were filming. He noticed too late. He dropped the ID. Literally. It slipped through his fingers and hit the floor. Sandra didn't pick it up. She waited. Devine crouched, retrieved it, and handed it back to her with shaking fingers. I'm sorry, ma'am, he whispered. Sandra took it. Still no change in her expression. Are we free to go now? Rendell's voice cracked when he finally spoke. Don't leave town. That was all he had left. Sandra placed the ID carefully back in her wallet. Took Kyla's hand. Turned. Walked. The crowd parted. And then, just before they reached the door, another voice came through Rendell's radio. Dispatch to Unit 41. We've got a call from Regional. You need to stay put. Federal complaint just came in. Civil rights officer on site says there's an active misconduct report being filed. Immediate supervisor en route. Devine froze. Rendell's face drained of blood. Sandra didn't turn around. She and Kyla kept walking. But the damage was already done. Sandra parked in the far corner of her apartment lot. Not because she needed space, but because she didn't want neighbors watching her cry. She didn't. She just sat. Kyla had finally dozed off in the back seat. One sneaker on, one off, fingers still gripping the strap of her backpack. The kind of sleep only children could fall into, full of fear, but exhausted enough to drift. Sandra turned off the engine. Let the silence take over. Then her work phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Government prefix. She answered. Lowe. Inspector Lowe, this is Danielle Price, Internal Oversight Liaison. May I confirm you were present earlier today at a Market Fresh grocery location in Cedarville? Sandra blinked. No introduction. No context. Just confirmation of her presence. Yes, I was. And did you engage with local law enforcement during that time? I was approached. I did not engage. A pause. Keys clicking. Were you in possession of your federal identification during the encounter? Yes. Did you display or reference your authority in any verbal manner? Sandra gripped the steering wheel. No. The officer requested ID. I provided it. Were there any threats issued to the officer? Absolutely not. Another pause. Then came the quiet pivot. Inspector Lowe, I must inform you this inquiry stems from a use of authority complaint. Filed anonymously. Sandra's jaw clenched. Anonymous? The form was submitted within the hour. Claims indicate you implied punitive consequences for a local officer conducting a lawful stop. I'll need a full written incident log by 6 p.m. Wait, he detained me in front of my child. For milk. That doesn't count? Inspector, I'm not here to evaluate justification. Just the facts. Your log, 6 p.m. Thank you. Click. Sandra stared at the blank phone screen. Internal complaints. No context. No presumption of innocence. And no mention of his name anywhere. She stepped out of the car, closed the door softly so Kyla wouldn't wake, and leaned against the side. 3 years in federal oversight. 9 cities. Dozens of trainings, audits, internal reforms. And all it took to flip the entire system on her was standing still. She opened her notes app and stared at the blinking cursor. Her fingers hovered, then typed. At 3:07 p.m., I was profiled in a grocery store aisle. I complied. I de-escalated. I said nothing threatening, but because I refused to shrink, I became the threat. She stopped, backspaced it all, typed again. At 3:07 p.m., I was detained. My daughter cried. My badge was ignored. I am submitting this log under protest. She hit save. Didn't send it. Not yet. Because she knew what came next. Silence from above. Paperwork from below. And the waiting. Always the waiting. Her authority meant nothing now. Protocol didn't protect people like her. It protected them. By morning, Sandra's inbox held 17 unread messages. 12 were marked internal only. 4 from legal. 1 from Division Director Julius Kane. Subject line. Need to discuss today, urgent. She didn't open it. Instead, she stared at it for a full minute. Then looked up. The office hallway outside her door was quiet. Too quiet. Her badge still opened the security lock. For now. She sat at her desk and pulled her blazer tighter, like it might shield her from what was coming. The door opened without a knock. You've got 5 minutes, said Ava Holloway, legal compliance officer. Thin smile. Clipboard. Cold voice. Sandra didn't move. 5 minutes for what? Ava stepped in, closed the door gently. Director Kane wants to offer you a resolution before this goes any higher. This? The Cedarville incident. It's already reached Washington. He's doing damage control. So are we. Sandra kept her face blank. Am I under investigation? No. But your judgment is. Because I didn't lie down in the aisle? Ava didn't flinch. Because you didn't disclose your position the second it began. That left the agency exposed. I was off duty. I was shopping with my child. That doesn't matter when the officer files first. Silence. Then Ava set a form on Sandra's desk. Just 1 page. What is this? Reassignment. Administrative leave. You'll still be paid. No disciplinary note. Just a pause. Voluntary. Sandra read the form. Every word felt like glass. Voluntary reassignment pending review. No finding of misconduct. No admission of bias by local law enforcement. No protection. She looked up. So the system gets to hide its shame behind my silence. Ava's tone didn't change. The optics of a federal agent being detained. It reflects poorly on our authority structure. Even if you were right, it complicates jurisdiction lines. And it's made you visible. That word. Visible. Sandra stood slowly. You want me to vanish? We want to protect the agency's credibility. At my expense. At everyone's expense. That's how this works. Sandra looked down at the paper. Then back up. No. Ava blinked. Excuse me? No. I'm not signing it. A beat of silence. Then Ava nodded once. That's your right. But off the record, I suggest you update your resume. Quickly. She left, the door closing behind her with a soft, mechanical click. Sandra stood alone in the room, phone in her hand. One more message unread. From Kyla's school. Subject, incident report, morning drop-off. She opened it. At 7:52 a.m., Kyla Lowe refused to exit her mother's vehicle. When staff approached, she stated she was scared of officers and wanted to stay where it was safe. We recommend speaking with a school counselor. Sandra dropped the phone. It hit the desk with a dull thud. She sank into her chair, the world around her shrinking into a single, cold fact. The system didn't just come for her. It came for her daughter, too. The email came at 2:04 p.m. Subject, Compliance Committee Review Confidential. Sandra clicked it once. Read it twice. It wasn't an invitation. It was an ambush. She was being scheduled to appear before the agency's internal compliance board. 5 members, all appointed. No union. No counsel. No transcript. Just an informal interview to assess her decision-making and representation of agency standards in public. The date, tomorrow. She closed her laptop, sat back, let the room settle into silence. Then she stood and walked across the office to the supply closet, opened the third shelf, pulled down a file labeled Scenarios, Federal Liability Structures. It was her file. She wrote it 2 years ago. Case studies, precedents, response templates. Everything they used in these informal reviews. She knew the system because she built part of it. She sat at her desk and flipped through the binder. Highlighted lines jumped out. When accused officers file first, internal optics favor local law enforcement unless disproven by hierarchy. Federal agents are discouraged from escalating jurisdiction disputes on-site, even if in the right. In the absence of formal threat, silence can be construed as coercion. That last one. She'd written it after a case in Atlanta. Now it was being used against her. Sandra smiled faintly. But it wasn't humor. It was clarity. Because now she knew exactly what they were doing. And more importantly, what she had to do. She picked up her phone and dialed a number from memory. 1 ring. 2. Inspector Lowe, said the voice on the other end. Older. Calm. Director Shepard. I need a name. You're calling me on a secure line during business hours. That tells me everything. Who hit you? Sandra's voice stayed even. Not who. Which office? A pause. Cedarville PD's internal systems just scrubbed their call logs. Officer Tim Rindle is now listed as acting in good faith, no misconduct. Someone's shielding him. I know, she said. You want to move this up the chain? No. I want the complaint to stay right where it is. Quiet. Contained. Why? Sandra stared at the wall. Because they expect me to swing wide. To escalate. To fight publicly. And? That's not how I win. Silence on the line. Then Shepard said, You're playing the long game. I always was. She hung up. 30 minutes later, someone knocked at her door. It was Julius Kane, the director. Dark suit. Gray tie. Smile like smoke. He stepped in, didn't sit. Just checking in, he said casually. Big meeting tomorrow. Compliance board's curious. Want to make sure you're prepared. Sandra didn't stand. You scheduling everyone who gets profiled in grocery stores? Or just me? Kane didn't blink. You're a high-profile asset. When you misstep, it ripples. I didn't misstep. I stood still. Kane leaned forward. You made people uncomfortable, Sandra. So did Rosa Parks. Kane's jaw tightened. Let me be clear. This is not about justice. This is about containment. We can make this go away, but only if you stop acting like a problem. Sandra nodded slowly. Then I guess I am one. Kane smiled again. Not kindly. Then don't expect anyone to protect you. He walked out. The door clicked shut. And Sandra, still seated, whispered to the empty room. I don't need protection. I need time. At 5:43 a.m., Sandra unlocked the restricted database from her home terminal. The agency's internal archive wasn't flashy, just rows of coded memos, redacted audits, and buried footnotes. Most agents barely used it. She built half of it. She searched, Rindle, T/pattern complaints. 3 hits. All sealed. Two had been marked as unsubstantiated. The third was labeled insufficient witness testimony. She clicked the third one. Red text flashed. Access requires supervisor override. Sandra entered her old administrator code, one that should have been revoked when she was placed under review. But it wasn't. She was still inside the machine. For now. The file opened. Her eyes scanned. Subject: Officer Timothy Rindle. Complaint hashtag 032, A/Civil Rights Intake Unit. Date: July 4th. Allegation: unlawful detainment of civilian at public park. Civilian name: withheld by request. Witness testimony redacted. Status: closed without escalation. Officer received procedural coaching. No suspension. No formal note on his record. Just coaching. She copied the file. Converted it to PDF. Saved it in a hidden folder named Pending Senate Subpoenas, Drafts. Then she opened a blank email. To Office of Federal Litigation Archive. Subject: mandated pattern review request, emergency category. She didn't send it yet. Not until she made one more move. She logged into the public transparency portal. Located her own case. The complaint filed against her. She clicked Appeal. Then attached 4 files. The call dispatch record. Her store receipt. Kyla's school report. And Rindle's July 4th case. Then she wrote one sentence. If this board finds my behavior improper, it must also find the system acceptable. She hit send. The timestamp: 6:08 a.m. At 6:41, she received a read receipt. At 6:53, her phone rang. You went over my head, Kane said. His voice was ice. I went through the system, she replied. You accessed sealed documents. I built the archive. Pause. What exactly is your goal here? To remind the agency that its silence doesn't make me disappear. Kane exhaled. We're not your enemy, Sandra. Then why are you protecting mine? He didn't answer. Then came the message that proved she was getting close. You'll be locked out of your admin credentials by noon. Then I have 5 more hours, she said, and hung up. She walked to the kitchen, poured cereal for Kyla, sat across from her daughter, who was still in pajamas, legs swinging from the chair. Mommy, are you okay? Sandra smiled softly. I'm getting there. But in her mind, she was already moving files, already preparing the next strike. She wasn't just defending herself now. She was building the evidence they had buried. And when she was done, they wouldn't be able to deny what she'd uncovered. Because she wasn't asking for justice. She was collecting proof of the pattern. By 10:07 a.m., Sandra's access was revoked. Her agency badge still opened the front entrance, but not the elevator to the 3rd floor. She stood in the lobby, calm but alert, watching the security guard avoid eye contact as he made a call behind the desk. She waited. A junior staffer from HR appeared 5 minutes later. Nervous. Too polite. Ms. Lowe, I've been asked to escort you to Conference B. Sandra raised an eyebrow. I wasn't informed of a meeting. It's just an internal clarification session. Shouldn't take long. Clarification. That word again. She followed him down the hall. Inside Conference B, 4 chairs, 1 long table, and a single laptop set up for video call. Nobody smiled. Director Julius Kane appeared on screen, flanked by 2 unknown figures in gray suits. Thank you for joining us, Ms. Lowe, said Kane. Sandra didn't sit. If this is a disciplinary hearing, I require official notice. This is not a hearing, he replied. It's a strategic containment discussion. Sandra blinked once. Strategic containment of what? One of the suited men answered. The risk you've introduced by exposing non-adjudicated cases without clearance. You mean I found an officer with a repeat complaint history, sealed by internal legal error? Kane cut in. Sandra, your method bypassed protocol. That makes you a liability. She laughed quietly. Your silence makes you complicit. The second man leaned forward. Ms. Lowe, if this continues, the agency will have no choice but to suspend your security clearance pending psychological review. Sandra narrowed her eyes. Psychological? It's standard practice, Kane said quickly. High-stress events can create distorted perspectives. Your recent behavior raises concerns. I filed a report. You declared war, he snapped. The screen went silent for a beat. Sandra finally sat. Her voice dropped low. You want to bury me before this reaches committee review. Before the ethics team sees the Rindle file. Before the oversight memo goes public. Nobody denied it. She leaned forward. So let me be clear. If you revoke my clearance, I'll file an emergency complaint through the Inspector General's office. And I'll name every person in this room as knowingly suppressing misconduct. You won't just lose your jobs. You'll be disbarred. Kane's jaw tightened. You're bluffing. Sandra pulled out a flash drive, set it gently on the table, then roll the dice. Nobody moved. Then Kane said, voice flat, dismissed. Sandra stood, took the flash drive with her. I'll be at my desk. As she reached the hallway, the HR staffer was waiting. But this time, his face looked different. Pale. Afraid. Ms. Lowe, your workstation has been reassigned. You're being moved to a remote protocol queue. She looked him dead in the eyes. A queue? Temporary relocation while things are sorted out. She nodded, walked past him. And as she passed the main hallway window, she saw a courier arriving, uniformed, carrying a sealed envelope, addressed to Office of Federal Personnel Appeals. It was hers. Someone had filed a retaliation complaint, but it hadn't come from her. Someone inside had moved before she could. She didn't know who, but it meant one thing. She wasn't the only one watching. At 8:12 a.m., Sandra received an alert. Notice, your federal security clearance has been deactivated. No warning. No hearing. Just gone. Her laptop screen dimmed, then locked. She tried her badge, denied. Her agency phone disconnected mid-call. Kyla was still brushing her teeth when Sandra closed the laptop. Mommy? Why'd your phone beep? Sandra smiled faintly. Just work things. She walked to the window. Outside, a white government sedan idled across the street. 2 men inside. Not moving. Just waiting. They weren't watching her. They were waiting to see how she'd respond. She turned back to the table, picked up the flash drive. The backup. The one they didn't know about. She didn't run. Didn't hide. She changed into a navy blazer, pulled her hair into a tight bun, and walked outside, past the sedan, past the waiting men, and got into her own car. She didn't look back. She drove to the federal building 2 cities over, not her own. A different district. One where the director owed her a favor. At 10:47 a.m., she sat across from Director Elena Cruz. Cruz didn't smile. I've heard the noise, she said quietly, but I haven't seen the documents. Sandra handed her the flash drive. Start with the Rendell file, then the suppression log, then the sealed arbitration letters. Cruz inserted the drive, clicked once. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't in the national system. No, it was buried by my office. Does your director know you're here? Sandra's voice was ice. He will. Cruz exhaled. You know what you're asking for, right? Sandra nodded. I want jurisdiction transferred. I want my complaint processed under Title VII escalation. I want external review, not internal. You'll make enemies. I already have. You'll lose your badge. Sandra smiled. Then I'll testify as a civilian. Cruz stared at the screen. Line after line. Complaint after complaint. Sandra sat still. She wasn't shaking. Not anymore. Cruz finally looked up. I'll need a sworn statement. Now. Ready. This might go to Senate oversight. That's the idea. At 12:14 p.m., her new witness ID was processed. Not employee. Whistleblower. By 2 p.m., her old district sent an internal memo titled, Unauthorized Transfer of Protected Materials. They called her a security threat. Filed to discredit her. Too late. Because at 3:07 p.m., the complaint she had filed, the one they buried, was retrieved from federal record retention and flagged as active misconduct under review. Not dismissed. Not sealed. Active. She sat on a bench outside the building. No badge. No gun. No title. Just the truth. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You made the board panic. They're scrambling. Proud of you. She stared at it. Then deleted it. No names. No trails. Just movement. Inside the building, her case file was printing. 8 pages thick. Stamped with red ink at the top. Confidential, reinstatement under review. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because tomorrow, everything would come to light. And someone, maybe several, would be forced to answer. But today, she sat alone. Powerless. But not silent. Not anymore. At 9:03 a.m., Sandra was called into room 4B. No cameras. No microphones. Just a long table and 4 people in gray. They didn't offer coffee. Or a seat. She sat anyway. The woman in the middle cleared her throat. Ms. Lowe, we've reviewed the whistleblower complaint. The supporting documentation. The recordings. Sandra didn't respond. There are inconsistencies in the reports submitted by Officer Rendell. His past conduct will be reopened for investigation. Sandra's face remained still. You're not here today as a defendant. And not quite as staff, either. You exist, at this moment, outside the system. Your evidence forced us to take that step. Then you've seen the pattern, she said calmly. The woman nodded. We have. And it's deeply concerning. One of the men across the table spoke next. We'd like to offer full reinstatement. With back pay. Clean record. Sandra didn't blink. And what happens to him? Another pause. Officer Rendell has been placed under formal suspension pending criminal review. As for Director Kane, his conduct is also under ethics inquiry. Internal? For now? Sandra folded her hands. Then I'll wait. The woman leaned forward. Ms. Lowe, you've done what very few people ever do. You stood your ground without breaking code. You were silent when it mattered and loud when it counted. Sandra's voice was quiet. I didn't do this for your recognition. Then why did you do it? She looked up. So my daughter never has to ask why I said nothing. The room fell silent. Then the woman slid a sealed envelope across the table. Your badge. If you want it back. Sandra looked at it. Didn't touch it. I'll let you know. She stood, walked to the door. Before she opened it, she turned back once. Next time you bury someone like me, make sure they don't know where the shovels are kept. The door closed behind her. That evening, she picked up Kyla from school. They walked home in silence. No music. No talk of work. Just footsteps on pavement. At the door, Kyla looked up. Mommy, are we safe now? Sandra knelt down, pulled her close. No, baby. Then why are you smiling? Sandra held her tighter. Because we're standing. They went inside, closed the door. And this time, it stayed closed. Not because they were hiding, but because they didn't know the world anything more.